All right, Russillo, we're going to talk Embiid because this is really one of the most unusual careers of any great player. And he looks like he's in peril again with this knee injury that he has. And I'm not sure if he's going to make it through the round. You don't know if he's going to make it through each game. He's in the playoffs, he's played 56 of 64 games. They're 29-27 when he plays in the playoffs. He averages 24-11. He shoots 46%, 28% from three, 21.8 PER, 9.3 free throws attempts a game, 34.7 minutes a game, 1.7 blocks a game. The stats don't look like what his regular season stats look like for the most part. He has 5 round one wins in his career. 2018 Miami round one. Can you name the best player on that team?
In 2018?
2018 Miami. Goran Dragic.
Yeah.
That was the one Justice Winslow year where they're like, we think we figured him out.
Everybody liked Justice Winslow had the highest approval rating for the lowest PER, maybe. In NBA
yeah,
history.
I was in on him. They beat 2019 Brooklyn. That was the Levert, D'Lo, Jared Allen, Dinwiddie team. They beat 2021 Washington, Westbrook, Beal. They beat 2022 Toronto that won 48 games. Siakam, Van Vliet, rookie Scotty Barnes, OG. So that was probably the best of the wins. And then last year beat the Brooklyn team post KD trade that didn't have anybody. So 5 round one wins and then 6 playoff series losses that we can go through. And I think we're headed for a 7th one here. I don't know how much of this is just horrible luck, and it might be all of it. But I do know that I haven't quite seen a career like this, Russillo, and I don't even really know how to put it in perspective. And we this was one of our big assignments for the podcast. Where did you land? What did you come up with?
Who is he like?
No, just where we are with him. He's 30 years old. I don't know if this gets better from a health standpoint because we've seen with great players that injuries start adding up. What is the light at the end of the tunnel here if you're like, hey, this guy's still going to win a title someday?
I don't know how you can bet on it. And it's not really even about him, the player. The playoff drop-off for the efficiency stuff is significant. And I know you've run through it here. But when I was looking at it this morning, I'm like, man, it's even worse than I thought it was. You start digging through the game logs. You're like, there's just a lot of bad games in there. And we don't treat him like some of the other players that are in the MVP conversation for having bad games. Because I think he's had, he had the Ben Simmons Atlanta series. And he's been hurt. It's one thing if he's healthy and he's playing like this, but he's been hurt in so many, like every single year there's something. And so.
I have that list, by the way, for after you're done.
Okay. I don't know why this all of a sudden gets better post 30.
That's why we're doing this segment, because when you start putting a bunch of injuries on somebody, the trend in the league with the history of it with the good players is that the arrow usually starts pointing down after a while. And we saw this happen with Blake Griffin, right? Where Blake Griffin had a bunch of different injuries, and then all of a sudden Detroit was probably his last stand that one Detroit year, and then his body just started breaking down. Now, he's had some bad luck injuries, like 2018, they lost to Boston in 5 in round 2. Orbital fracture, concussion, right? Not his fault. Can't blame him on that, obviously. 2019 round 2, lost to Toronto in 7, knee tendonitis, and he was bad in that series, like for him.
And he had a left knee issue that year where he missed 14 games after the All-Star break.
Right. 2020 round 1, they got swept by Boston, no injury. 2021 round 2, lost to Atlanta in 7, had a torn meniscus. 2022 round 2, lost to Miami in 6. He had a torn thumb ligament from earlier in the playoffs, then had another orbital fracture concussion. This guy's had that twice, which is horrible. 2023 last year, lost to Boston in 7, had a knee sprain that he played with. And then this year has the meniscus. It's a lot of injuries, and including knee tendonitis, torn meniscus again, and a knee sprain. And not to mention all the stuff that he had early. But the reason it's so fascinating is, I did my pyramid and I have all the best centers ever, right? And just in descending order. the top level, Russell, Kareem, Wilt, Shaq, Hakeem, Moses, all of those guys, by the time they were in Embiid's age, they'd either been in the finals or won a title. The next level, Jokic, he won a title. The next level, Walton won a title early. David Robinson, conference finals a bunch of times. At least twice, right? With San Antonio, maybe once. Maybe, I think twice. Willis Reed won a title. Dave Cowens won a title. Patrick Ewing got to the finals, was always in the mix there. George Mikan was a million years ago. And then even you go down to level 2 guys, Wes Unseld made the finals in his third year. Nate Thurman, he was in the finals. Dwight Howard, he made the finals 2009. And Bob McAdoo did not make the finals until he was a role guy with the Lakers. But I just listed 6, 7, 10, 13, 17 centers that are probably the 17 best centers in the history of the league, right? And Embiid's had less success than everybody except McAdoo at this point. So it's not like nothing's happening here. And yet it's weird because I don't know how much you can stick them with, you know? Like it's like it really seems like most of this is just bad luck.
I definitely think it's on the bad luck side more than it is anything else. But I've said this for a long time now, watching how some of these tighter playoff games have closed out. This is why this position, we've evolved from this traditional center position, even though he's not a traditional center with his touch and his shooting ability and the way you got to get him shot. But like the most valuable guys are the guys that can have the ball in their hands and then figure out how to set up their own offense or offense for everybody else, like Jokic. I mean, those are the most valuable guys.
But you could say Embiid was like that in the first part of the regular season, right? I mean, he was scoring 35 a game. You could
the numbers
say, well,
are nuts.
Maybe translate.
He was on track for a 35 PER, but I don't know that he would have held that up. I mean, it would have been the highest of all time. I don't know that that was going to happen if he played, 65 games. He's never played 70 games in a season. But I think there's a slight limitation for him offensively in comparison to the other. And I'm not just talking about scoring numbers and his averages and his shooting and all that stuff. I'm just talking about like he needs to be set up just a little bit more than the other 4 or 5 best players that we think about in the league. I feel that way. Other people would disagree. But this is someone that I've been making mistakes on for a while. When I go back to the draft, I liked him better than everybody else. You're like, okay, so wait, he's getting foot surgery? Like, all right, well, now what do you do with him? And then he sits out the first 2 years, which you could say was complications of the foot surgery, but let's face it, like Hinkie didn't want him playing out there. Then he plays 31 games his third year, and then he's coming up for a contract. And I made a huge mistake with my opinion on it. Was just, I don't know that I'd want to give this guy 9 figures all of a sudden. And then it turns into, he's got the MVP. Some would argue he should have a second one. I wouldn't, but he gets the one last year, and that's the whole point. Like, so he's actually surpassed what I thought he could be, because I go, who has a start of his career that way? And then it all just kind of works out.
Right. You're supposed to be a bust with the way his career started, not a potential
not an MVP
down the road,
right,
who actually wins the MVP.
Right. So, like, where are you with him as being the face of your franchise?
I just wouldn't trust it. We've seen enough at this point. He's going to be 31 next season. He's a big dude, right? You've stood on a court that he's been on the court with. Like, he's a big dude that carries a lot of weight, and structurally has just had a bunch of things happen to him now. Like, if I'm a Philly fan, I'm like, oh yeah, we got Embiid for the next 5-6 years. Like, would you feel like you had him for the next 5-6 years? It's almost like you're taking it year by year, because you don't know how his body's going to respond, because each year it's something else, and watching him, there's another debate about whether he should even be playing in this series.
Yeah, that's why as we're talking this all out, like, it can feel incredibly unfair, because you're like, hey, you guys, he's not healthy. Like, why are you guys doing this now? But this is the point.
100% not healthy. He threw an alley-oop off the backboard to himself, came down like he was shot.
But it's not that
came back later.
Like, it's the same way I feel about Kawhi, where it's like, yeah, he's awesome, but like, okay, like, is he going to be there? It's just different. It just means there's other guys I'd rather have than him that aren't as good as him, which I think is totally reasonable.
All right, so let's say Josh Harris called us. Let's say Philly loses to the Knicks in round 1 and Embiid goes trying to recover, get in shape for next season. And Josh Harris is like, what do you think I should do? Because I could move on from this and get a player back and a bunch of picks. Or when you have somebody who, when he's healthy, is one of the 5 best players in the league, hands down, how can you give that up for an unknown blank? You can't. So you kind of have to ride it out. Like, I just don't know what you do. It's unsolvable. And I don't know if there's been a lot of situations like this. Like, I thought the Clippers made a mistake when they extended Kawhi, because to me, that just felt like, hey, let's just see a healthy year before, the money will be there. We'll take care of you at the end of this season. Let's see how this looks. Kawhi, which I think is an important piece of the Embiid conversation. Kawhi goes to the Clippers. He plays 13 of 13 playoff games in 2020. He plays 11 and 19 in 21, gets hurt, misses the last 8, misses the whole next season, no playoffs. Last year, plays the first 2, gets hurt again, misses the last 3. This year, missed the one today. He's played 26 of 38 playoff games.
I'm surprised it's that high.
And he's missed, but he also missed 2022 and they missed the playoffs. So really, it's even more than that. And was not available to finish 3 of the last 4 postseasons, basically. And they just extended him. And it's like the Embiid thing. I don't know how that gets better. It's like, oh man, remember those 4 rough Kawhi years? But now he's totally healthy. I just don't see it. And I don't see it because I've been following basketball long enough that when guys just keep getting hurt, it usually doesn't get better. When they hit their 30s, it gets worse. And I know medicine's better, and I know training's better, and we know our bodies.
He's got to get smaller. He's got to get smaller. I don't understand.
You're talking Embiid.
Right. Now, he's got the knee injury, so I can't imagine there were many cardio options for a guy that big that's trying to rush back to even get back to even play in the playoffs. Like, a credit to him that he's even going like, no, I'm not shutting this down. Like, I want to be out there. I want to try to figure this whole thing out. But the second he came back, you were like, uh-oh. And he's still putting up 30. Again. Right. He's still putting up 30. So I would think the biggest thing for him to try to, because I don't think any sane person would disagree with us on this one. Like, if you're asking the simple question, hey, here's the timeline of the last 5 years, and this is how it's gone. This is what it looked like yesterday, and project the next 5 years. Like, if you're sitting there going, oh, no, it'll all work out. Like, well, okay. Telling the team that they would have to do something with him, that's not going to happen. Because if Embiid was available tomorrow, say in the free agent world, everybody would just pay him. Because I think a lot of these transactions are, all right, but what if we have a chance that this guy is this good? I think that's what the Kawhi thing is. And granted, the Clippers don't have their picks. They're moving to the new place.
But that was the Harden trade, too. It was the combo of the Kawhi extension and the Harden trade. At least we have a chance. We can sell some hope to our fans.
Yeah, right. Like, this doesn't make a ton of sense. Yep, there's tons of downside, a lot of risk. But what else are we going to do with our money? So, they've got Embiid under control for 2 more years as a player option back there. So it's not like you even have to worry about that part of it. You would probably just say, okay, we need to do whatever we can to get him as healthy as possible and take another shot at it. Because when you know he's right, he's one of the 5 best players in the world. And that's all we're going to do. Now, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with their cap space. And if they don't get Paul George, and if it's a bunch of 1-year deals to take another shot at, cap space again, is Embiid going to be patient? Like, that could be the thing where it would be different, because I'm always, on the lookout for like the next guy that would say, okay, this isn't working for me. But I think
it's going to be somebody from round 1 who loses.
Absolutely. We're due.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. The Lakers get knocked out in round 1 and Philly gets knocked out in round 1, and Josh Harris runs into Jeannie Buss. And they're having wine, and one thing leads to another, and they start talking about Embiid and Davis. Should we just flip them for each other?
Is Jay Moore there?
Jay Moore's there. He's intrigued. He's always liked Embiid. Thinks he's funny. Who pauses longer on that conversation? Philly or Los Angeles?
LA do it. LA would do it in a second. So I think the pause is from Harris. Because then the problem is like, okay, this hypothetical, which we shouldn't be doing after game 1. All right, we shouldn't. We both know that.
Listen, this is what we do in podcasting. We have dumb conversations and talk them out. This is the whole point of a podcast.
I love it. All right, so now that we've said that, don't try this at home, right? Like a little warning line. You couldn't be Daryl and the entire group and go, okay, cool, we have this transaction. Now what? Now what do we do? Because nobody's
Davis
trading
and
you.
Maxey in cap space. Kind of like it. I kind of like it for both teams. It reminds me of when Penny Hardaway when he signed with Phoenix. Remember the Orlando thing? Like, just too much stuff had happened, and then he went to Phoenix. And Orlando was like, we're devastated, but deep down was like, I don't know, not sure how many more good years that guy has.
Remember when Phoenix was apparently the only place you could go if you had injuries?
Right.
Like, if this were 04,
the only
guys,
thing.
The podcast would have started with like, I got to get Embiid to Phoenix. Something in the water.
I think the Embiid we're watching right now is carrying too much weight, and it's dangerous considering the stuff that has happened to his lower body. Next year, who knows? It's a tough one. When he went down, I thought his season was over and next year was done. He looked that bad when they showed he was lying on the ground, and it seemed like his eyes were rolling in the back of his head. He looked like Gaethje. Like it was like, oh my God, this guy just blew out and then 20 minutes he was back. It's a roller coaster ride, man. The draft was 10 years ago. This is now a full decade of Embiid, and I don't think Philly fans, they're in the same position they were in when they drafted the guy and he had a broken foot, where they're like, we don't know what we're getting from this dude. But when he's out there and he's feeling it, this is the guy who was averaging more points than minutes played in the season, which I don't know if anyone had done that since Wilt. So you're probably right. Philly's got to be like, all right, we got to talk ourselves back into this one.